One of the saddest sights I've ever seen and one of the saddest rooms I've ever been in was on a weekday morning. I was driving up to preach at a camp, like on one of the mountains around here, and as I was on my way, I was looking for a coffee shop that was close to the base of the mountain. And as you do, you think, okay, what's the closest one to the base of the mountain? I'll go to that one, I'll get some coffee, then I'll go up the mountain and start preaching the camp. It was a junior high camp for a different church, and this was years ago, but I remember it was the saddest thing I ever saw because I didn't know at the time when I plugged it into my phone, but the Starbucks that I was going to, and see how low I was going, Starbucks is already sad enough. This wasn't even any normal Starbucks. This was a Starbucks that was inside of a casino. So I walk into this casino on like a Monday morning at like 10:30 a.m., and it was one of the saddest sights I ever saw because what it was it was filled with all of these elderly people who they looked like, they were worse than screenagers, right? I mean, they make fun of you with the phone. They're sitting with their nose really close to the slot machine. That's not even a real slot machine. It's like an electronic slot machine. They're swiping their card, and they're just gambling all their money away. And they're just sitting there. The room stinks, and it was full of people that looked like grandmas and grandpas. It was just so sad because you think, man, these people are wasting their money. They're wasting their time. These people, let's just be honest, they're at the end of life. They're about to die. And on a Tuesday morning, they're sitting like a slave to this vice that many of them probably have been slaves to that vice for a long time, sitting there wasting their time when they should be at their kids, their grandkids' t-ball games. They should be going to some soccer game for their grandkid. They should be going to some, they should be playing golf, at least something. They should be doing something, but they're sitting there gambling their life away at the end of their life with a rigged game, because those slot machines, they're all rigged. Right? They're worse than the True North Cup, right? You think the True North Cup is rigged, right? That's not rigged. That's a real competition. No, these machines are rigged to just take your money. You're never going to win big in an ultimate sense. It's rigged. And you know what? The reality is if I, were to stop them and say, hey, do you know this game's rigged? They'd probably just get mad at me and say, get out of here, kid, right? They know they're playing a rigged game, but they don't care. It's a sad sight, right? You would never turn into one of those people, right? I hope not. Right? Well, you start by not gambling in the first place, right? That's a good start. But you would never turn into a slave of any vice, would you? Right? You wouldn't want to be one of those people. That would be terrible. See, I'm putting this way because we just read in the scripture reading in Titus 3 that it says, we were all once foolish, disobedient, led astray. And the phrase that was used in Titus 3 is, we were slaves to various passions and pleasures. That word pleasure, it's a word we don't talk about all the time, but it's a good word to define. It's a good word to think about because that is Solomon's next test in the book of Ecclesiastes. He said this, what if I spent my whole life chasing the good life? That might make me happy. Remember, Ecclesiastes is this book in the Old Testament that's all about Solomon, the king, who looks at life and says, maybe I can find meaning under the sun without considering God. Maybe if I live my life to the fullest and I have all the experiences and all the wisdom and all the riches, maybe then that will satisfy me. Maybe then I'll be happy. Maybe then I'll figure out the secret sauce to life. And he says through the book of Ecclesiastes, that was a dead end. That was a dead end. And what I want to tell you this morning is the biggest dead end that I think captures more high school students than any other is not the chase of money, although that's a big one in the world. That's probably a bigger problem for adults. It's not the chase of wisdom. I know that's not the high schooler's problem, right? A bunch of intellectuals, right? A couple of you might be chasing wisdom. I think the biggest one, the net that captures the most souls in this room, is the trap of pleasure. A good time. Fun. The party lifestyle. Even if that's just one example of it. I think pleasure is probably the most dangerous for high school students because it's probably the most alluring to you because you stand at this point thinking, think about all the fun that I will have in the future. If I can live life a certain way, it will be so much fun. The next 10 years, the next 20 years, how much fun could I have? And Solomon says, before you try that, I'll just tell you, that's a dead-end road. You can try that, certainly. I mean, a lot of people do. I mean, even in this room, like if we really were able to assess where we all wanted to be in all of our life goals, many of us are on the road of chasing pleasure, thinking that it's going to lead somewhere. But Solomon says, I'll just tell you the end before you even start. That's a dead end. So I want you in the book of Ecclesiastes to turn to it. Look at chapter 2. We're going to study the first 11 verses here, and I want you to look at what Solomon did. And like I said, 2 sermons ago, if you hear me say this, right, and you think, well, church kid, pastor's kid, Bible school kid, like, yeah, I don't really think I'm going to take that from you. That's fine. That's fair. I think that's actually a wise thing for you to say. Fine. Let's look at Solomon. Let's look at his credentials to say this kind of stuff about the enjoyment of the world, and let's listen to him. Let's hear from Solomon, the king. Remember chapter 1, he said, I looked at everything in this world, and the end of it was vanity. Vanity is that word hevel in the Hebrew. It means empty or meaningless. Sometimes it's used to describe idols. So like idols in the Old Testament, they'd bow down to these statues. And the authors of the Old Testament, they oftentimes say, the idols are vanity or empty. What does it mean for an idol to be empty? It doesn't mean that it's hollow, right? It doesn't mean that it's a wooden idol, it's empty, it's hollow. It means idols, they can't cash the check that they write. They're not as fulfilling as you think that they are. So he says, when I look at all of life under the sun, all of the stuff that you can get, all the reputation you can get, all the things of this world, I've realized all of it under the sun on this world, vanity, empty, meaningless. It doesn't do what you think it's going to do. It doesn't make you happy the way you think it's going to make you happy. And then he says in chapter 2, after he's talking about, I thought wisdom would help me out. I thought if I could just be the smartest and know how everything works, then I'd be satisfied. Chapter 1, he says, once you realize how the world works, it just makes you more sad because you realize it's crooked and you can't even fix it. In chapter 2, he said, so I said in my heart, chapter 2, verse 1, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself, right? So he says, I had a little self-talk here. Come now, I'll test you. So chapter 2, verses 1 to 11 is a test. It's just, he's saying, I tried it. I tasted the world. Not just tasted, I had the whole thing. I just had so much of the world. And I said even to myself, enjoy yourself. That's literally in Hebrew, it means to see goodness. And if you're telling yourself in your soul, see goodness or enjoy goodness, it's why we translate it, enjoy yourself. He's trying to say, have a good time, dude. Don't be so uptight. Because the wisdom guy of Solomon, he's like, I was just so uptight. Maybe if I just loosen up a little bit and have some fun, then I might find the secret to living the good life. And then look what he says. He gives the conclusion at the beginning. But behold, in other words, look at this. This also was vanity. Now, the rest of this passage is going to describe his quest for meaning through this. So, pleasure, right? I said that's an important word to define, okay? It's the Hebrew word simha. The Hebrew word simha. And it basically means joy, gladness, enjoyment, rejoicing, delight. Like it's translated a lot of different ways. And it's just a general word for a good time. So I think when we use it in English, when we talk about a pleasure, it's not just a desire for something, right? Like desire and pleasure are slightly different. Desire is like the thing that I want. It's the motivation. It's the want, right? Pleasure is the thing that you do desire, right? So desires and pleasures are connected, but they're not exactly the same thing. The pleasure is, I want this thing, and I would argue, why do you want that thing? Because of the feeling associated with it. So I think a pleasure is some object or thing or goal that you desire because there's an associated feeling with that. And if you think, okay, are you really chasing feelings? Some of you are like, I'm too masculine for that. I'm not chasing feelings. I just want to be rich. It's like, well, be careful, because I think there's a feeling that's attached to those riches, and I think that might be really why. So the list that he's going to give here, in all earthly terms, is impressive. Like the stuff that he says he did, the goals that he had, and the goals that he achieved, impressive. But at the end of it, he says it's vanity. I mean, verse 1 is like just a good summary of all of this. But if you just drop down to verse 9, you'll see kind of the end. He says, so I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. And also my wisdom remained with me. So I got everything and I stayed smart. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep for them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. So that's also interesting too, right? The eyes and the heart. Those are two metaphors to talk about, the eyes are what we see. So everything I saw that I wanted, I had. Everything that I couldn't even see but I desired internally, I chased that too. He followed his heart. He did everything he wanted to do. He says, I kept my heart from no pleasure. Middle of verse 10 here in Ecclesiastes 2 says, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. So the thing about pleasures is we oftentimes think that, like, if I got that thing or if I achieved that goal, then on the other side of it, I would be satisfied. And he says that's the lie right there. The reality is there is pleasure in chasing a goal. I mean, look what he says. He says, for my heart found pleasure in my toil. So, like, the work that I did, like, in other words, it's like with Legos, right? It's not like looking at the Millennium Falcon thing that gives you pleasure. It's building it. It's creating it, right? Like, that's what makes Legos fun, is the process of putting it together, right? It's not the end product, okay? And that's what he says about all these pleasures. I thought I'd get pleasure on the other side, but it was really just like the process. That's all I got. And he says, what's my reward for my toil? I thought, now I'm going to be happy. He says, nope. I was happier when I was building the house than when I was living in it. I was happier when I was chasing it than when I got it. He says, that's the illusion to all this. That's why chasing pleasure, it doesn't satisfy us the way we think, because we think there's going to be a reward on the other side. He says, no, the only reward you got was the fun that you had along the way. Right? It's like, I don't know, it's like a cliche. It's like it's the journey. It's not the destination, right? That's what he's trying to say about pleasures. We all think that, getting the pleasure will make us happy. He says, no, it's just the chase. But here's the thing. When the chase is over, it's over. And you got nothing really to show for it. In verse 11, he says, then I considered all that my hands had done and all the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, a striving after wind. Right? How much wind can you collect this afternoon? And how valuable is that? It's like, the wind is something. It's a real thing, right? Try to collect it. Try to strive after it. It's like there's something, but not really much. It's vanity. It's empty. There was nothing to be gained under the sun, which is, I think, our key phrase here for the whole book of Ecclesiastes. That's why the mosaic is a bunch of suns, right? And doesn't fit because it's unsatisfying. It's like a comedian explaining a joke. I shouldn't have told you that. But the point is, everything under the sun doesn't fit. It's unsatisfying. It's vanity. I said we were going to look at Ecclesiastes 2, 1 to 11. I just really quickly want to consider verse 12, and then we'll get into our points that we're writing down. After the pleasure seeking, he says, so I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. So back to the intellectual pursuit. And then this phrase, I think, is so important for a whole book of Ecclesiastes. He says, for what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Okay. I love that verse, and I think that's super helpful for you, because I'd want to put that right back on our laps and say, what can you do that Solomon hasn't done? Like, if you think that Solomon's pursuit of pleasure didn't work out for him, right, but it might work out for you, Solomon says, what can you do that I haven't done? What does the man do who comes after the king? In other words, Solomon has achieved more than you will ever achieve. So if you try the same thing he tried, guess what? Same result. You can't, like, glitch the system, in another way of putting it. You're going to get the same result. If you try what Solomon tries, you're going to get what Solomon got, which is vanity in the end. So I don't want you to repeat his test. I said all this was a test. It's a lifelong experiment, in other words. Don't be fooled into chasing it. Two main things I want you to do from this. Point number 1 and point number 2, okay? Point number 1 is this. I want you to be warned of the power of pleasures. And I think this one we don't give enough credit for. And I think we see this all throughout this text, particularly the verses we just looked at, verse 1, verse 10, verse 11. But I want you to be warned that there is great power in pleasures. Right? If you thought there's no power in pleasures, I think you're a foolish person. Right? There is something that's powerful, because there is a rush that you get in doing something fun. Right? You accelerate that car. Do you know how it feels? Like, not your Civic, right? But like, do you know how it feels to accelerate in a car going fast? It feels so good. Okay, if you've never done that, right? Maybe you should, don't try it, but like, see, that's the problem with pleasures, right? It's like, they're dangerous. These things do feel good, right? I don't know. A drive down PCH during golden hour with the windows down, right? And your favorite music. Like, there is something to that. That is cool. It's awesome, right? But that's a pleasure. That's a good example. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's the other thing about pleasures. When I say beware or be warned of the power, I'm not saying that all pleasures in and of themselves are wrong. In fact, some argue, I don't know if I'd argue this far, but like when Solomon lists the things that he sought after, none of them are inherently sinful. I think maybe a couple of them are probably a little sinful, but some argue, look, everything there you could excuse. They're all excusable. They're all permissible, but he made it everything. He chased it, and he came up empty. Right? So for you, right, that's the thing. This group, as a high school student, right, you're all in different places with this. Some of you are like right at the beginning of the road of chasing pleasure, and you just started, and you just think like, maybe if I just get popular, like I'm a freshman now, I'm a sophomore now, but like maybe if like at school everybody likes me or everybody thinks I'm funny or something, then I'll be happy. Maybe you're at the beginning of this. Solomon just tells you, hey, the whole road, it leads to nowhere. Maybe you're in the middle. Like maybe you're pursuing these things and you like have in the back of your head, you know that you're kind of like pursuing what's wrong, but also kind of trying to do what's right. And you kind of are caught in between. Ultimately, one of these things is going to win in your life, the pursuit of God or the pursuit of pleasure. And some of you might be like that first analogy of like that old person at the slot machine just hitting it over and over again. Some of you are slaves to passions and pleasures, and you've never thought to change your mind because maybe you've justified it completely, thinking that it's not even wrong. So I know this group, there's a lot of different people in a lot of different places. And some of you, you might be really dissatisfied. Maybe you have been chasing pleasures, but you know in your heart of hearts, this is not what I was made for. I know you're in different places, but I want you to hear a couple things about pleasures that the scriptures say. 4 verses for you to write down here. 1 Peter 2, verse 11. Very important. We don't often think that pleasures and passions, right, which are not exactly the same. Passions are like desires, right? Pleasures are the thing that we desire, right? 1 Peter 2, verse 11, Peter tells those Christians, he says, beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles. Like you don't belong in the place you're at, right? You're a USC fan at a UCLA game, right? Like you don't belong where you are. You're sojourners and exiles. I urge you to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Have you ever thought that some of the pleasures that you are seeking are trying to kill you? That some of those pleasures and passions, the genuine, at the heart of what's behind those things, is to destroy your life. Peter says, you got to be careful, because a lot of these desires of the flesh, they're just trying to kill you. You got to abstain. You got to be careful. Back to the Old Testament, the wisdom literature, Proverbs 30, verse 15, great little verse about how satisfaction works. It says, the leech has 2 daughters, give and give. You know what a leech is? Right? It's like one of those little animals that would stick to people and like suck blood. Right? He says, the leech just wants 2 things. Give, more. Just give me more, give me more. Our desires are that way. Like you want to be rich? Cool. Like so, yeah, make $100,000. That's great. Oh, then once you get 100, like that's light work, right? We're going to go to $250,000, right? Well, then really, I mean, you're not really even doing well unless you're making $1 million a year, right? And then really, I mean, you're not at the top. See, like the leech of desire, it just wants more and more. If you think that adding more fuel to the fire will like stop the fire, it's like, hey guys, just a little wisdom. Adding more and trying to satiate the desire more and more with giving it more doesn't make the desire go away. It just makes the desire, an appetite, bigger. The Bible's so clear about that. And you don't even need a Bible to figure that out. You could figure that out even without a Bible, but the Bible's clear. Another verse, 2 Timothy 3, verse 4. When Paul wants to describe how the end times are going to be, and he wants to tell you how bad it's going to be at the end, he starts listing off all these sins that people are going to do. Listen to what he says in the middle. This is verse 4. He says, people will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Like comfort, pleasure, that will be at the top. That will be the God of people's life, not the true God. Right? That's a sign of an unsaved person there. And then finally, before we get into this big list here that you got on your page, Luke 9:23. Think about this. When Jesus calls people to be his disciples, have you ever thought about what he tells them to do? What's step one? If anyone wants to come after me, do you know step one of following Jesus? He says, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. So, question for you. If you think that living as a Christian in Orange County in the 21st century, if you think what it's going to mean to be a Christian is to do whatever you want, have you ever considered the first thing that Jesus tells people? You want to be my disciple? Great. Step one, say no to yourself. That's like step one. And we think, well, but not us though, right? We get to do whatever we want. No, you don't. I don't. None of us get to do whatever we want if you want to follow Jesus. But we don't think that way. Self-denial is not a popular concept today. Self-discipline is not a popular concept, but Solomon would tell you, listen to Jesus. Deny yourself. So be warned that there's power in your pleasures. And the Christian life sometimes involves saying no. Not all the time, but sometimes it does involve saying no. And the second thing, I want you to see what Solomon does here. And I don't want you to be all that impressed, okay? Because, think about it. All the things he mentions are all meant to be impressive. So he could be boasting about all these things and saying, look at how great I am. That's not his intention. His intention is to say, look at what I had and see that none of it was worth it. None of it lasted. But the problem is some of you, if you're not warned, you'll go and pursue some of these things because of how impressive they seem to you. Point number 2, I want you to be unimpressed by the feelings that follow these pleasures, okay? So, I want you to see these things, and some of them are impressive things. In fact, one of them, even the word impressive is used, right? But I want you to look at them, and I want you to think, what's the feeling that's really connected? That's not the most important thing. Sometimes just a little bit of critical thinking when you're at the start of a journey really helps you with where you end up. And I think that if this sermon does anything for you, it's this. I want to show you what Solomon did. I want to show you what he says the world has to offer. And I just don't want you to be impressed. I want you to look at it and say, yep, got it, understand. Also, for some of you who are living for it, I want you to say, dude, Solomon already knew about this. The things that I thought were novel to me, they've already been done. So, what does he say here? Let's start in verse 2. Back to Ecclesiastes 2. Let's go through these one by one. That's all these letters on the worksheet. We'll go quick. I just want you to see what all these are, and I want you to be like, that feeling, that pleasure, I'm not going to be impressed with. Verse number 2. I said, of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? Okay? The book of Ecclesiastes is going to talk about laughter. And here's an interesting thing. One of the pleasures that people live for is laughter. And essentially, it's to make a joke out of everything. That's letter A. Make a joke out of everything. I don't want you to be impressed. I don't want you to be drawn in to a life of making a joke out of everything. Now, is it wrong to make jokes? Not always. Is it wrong to joke about some things? Not always. In fact, godly people do that often. In fact, the Bible does that sometimes. But is making a joke out of everything and laughing my way through life and not considering the weighty things of life, is that the right way to live? For some of you, it's appealing. For some of you, you're like, dude, I'd rather not take anything serious. I'd rather just laugh my way through. He says, it's mad. I said of laughter, it's mad. In other words, if you laugh about everything, you start turning good things bad, bad things good, and all of a sudden now you're going to go crazy. And your whole morals are going to get flipped if you say, I'm going to make a joke out of everything. Some examples of this in Ecclesiastes. One of them is Ecclesiastes 7, verse 6. It says, for as the crackling of thorns under the pot. So like the idea of you're cooking food and you put thorns, you don't mean to put thorns in, but you're burning some wood, right? And there's some thorns. Apparently that would make a loud sound. It would pop, right? It says, for as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity, right? It's obnoxious. It makes a sound, but it doesn't provide the heat. It doesn't do anything. It's just foolish. Another maybe stronger verse in Proverbs. Proverbs 14, verse 9 says, fools mock at the guilt offering, right? Do you know what people who joke their way through life start to joke about? They start to joke about the serious things in life. Like what? I don't know, like a guilt offering in the Old Testament. Like being a little kid laughing, oh, look at the person walking in, oh, look at what they're doing. They're mocking the worship, which is also what happens a lot of times, maybe for a lot of people in this room. You mock the worship, right? Let's make a joke out of everything, right? We don't make a joke out of everything, right? That's not wise. But some of us are drawn in because there's a feeling that we get by making what's not light, light, right? I would even warn you, be careful about the practice of satire, because satire can be all-consuming. Now everything's satire. Now nothing's serious, and all of a sudden, we're fools. Right? Making a joke out of everything. Be careful about that. That's verse 2. Verse 3 in Ecclesiastes 2. He says, I searched my heart how to cheer my body with wine. Here's the next thing. Letter B. Intoxicating substances, using intoxicating substances. Some of you are going to be drawn in because you think, well, I want to feel a certain way by taking a certain thing. And in this case, it was wine for him. He says, I thought I could make myself happy by drinking a little bit. He says, my heart was still guiding me with wisdom, which I think is a helpful note. He wasn't saying, hey, I tried to be, a sloppy, fall down, blackout drunk. I don't think that's what he's saying. He is saying, I want to be a wine taster. There's something to that, right? All these people, they go and they try all the wines and they go to the little wineries and they have their little parties, and it's like, maybe that will be the thing, right? Solomon was high class, right? He says, my heart was still guiding me with wisdom, and I was seeking how to lay hold on folly till I might see what is good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. It's like I tried that. I tried, to feel a certain way with substances. Now, I want you to realize this. Getting drunk, getting buzzed, getting high, if you think that's a new thing, and you think you all just figured out how to do that, and people haven't been doing that for a long time, right? People have been doing that for a long time. The Bible has a lot to say about that. And you know what it says about it? Stupid. Wrong. Takes away self-control. Leads to more sin. Right? Here's just a couple of examples. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 29 to 35. This whole section is just amazing poetry here in the book of Proverbs. The author says, who has woe? Who has strife? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who tarry long over wine. Those who go to try mixed wine. So don't look at wine when it's red or when it sparkles in the cup and goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a serpent and stings like an adder. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. You'll be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, like one who lies on the top of a mast. They struck me, you will say, but I wasn't hurt. They beat me, but I didn't even feel it. When shall I awake? I must have another drink. I don't know if you know that that's in the Bible, but that's in Proverbs chapter 23. So, if you think, yeah, that will make me happy, just take the example of Solomon, take the example of everyone in Scripture, and you just take the example of people who've tried it and who have lived certain lives controlled by substances, and I don't know, ask them in the end, what was it like? By the way, today's alcohol and today's drugs are significantly stronger than even they were 50, 60 years ago. If you looked at the rates of how much, obviously you could make pure alcohol a long time ago, right? People were making moonshine and stuff. You could have, that was really dangerous for people too, right? A lot of people getting hurt by that. But the alcohol of today, very strong compared to the alcohol of the Old Testament. So even when you're talking about wine, we were looking at really low levels of alcohol. You could make it stronger, and the Bible actually has a category for drink that's stronger than wine or just normal alcohol they drink. It's called strong drink. And so people talk about how the Bible, there's some good associated with wine because it meant they were a fruitful society, they were getting good things. Nothing good is associated with strong drink, okay? So just an example. Proverbs 20, verse 21 says, wine is a mocker, and strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by these is not wise. So, not smart. By the way, today's marijuana, today's THC vapes, today's THC edibles, extremely potent. The whole reason to take those is to get high, and it's illegal for you and stupid for adults. I guess that's the bottom line there. So don't do that. All right, verse 4. He says, I made great works. I tried architecture. Well, what if I build stuff? Like, what if I make stuff? That might make me happy because all this, like the wine and the laughter, that's all just what fools do. But I'm a mature person. I'm a wise person. What if I built a city? What if I built amazing houses? That way I'd leave a legacy. That's a higher kind of pleasure that he said. Verse 4, I made great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself, which is a key word, key phrase in this text. For myself. It comes up 3 times. For myself, for myself, for myself. Letter C, building impressive projects. There's something that's cool about that. There really is. But he says, that didn't satisfy me. By the way, the first big impressive project that humanity tried to build, Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. They said, come, let us build for ourselves a city with a tower, with its tops in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Do you remember what God said? It says, and God had to stoop down to just see their little tower. And what did he do? Disperse them. He did the very thing that they didn't want to have happen. The point is, like, people have been trying to make a name for themselves by building cities and building monuments and building things for themselves. And if you think that that's going to do it for you, let Solomon tell you it's not going to do it. Look at verse 5 and verse 6. He goes on to talk about the stuff he made. He says, I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. This feels a little bit better. This isn't so man-made now. Now we're talking about a return to nature. Maybe that will make me happy. Maybe being, a part of nature or utilizing nature or like building things to help nature be better. Maybe that will help. Letter D, harnessing the natural world. Sounds better. That was vanity. By the way, he keeps talking about trees and gardens and all this stuff. Many scholars have noted that the words he uses are the same kind of words that are used in Genesis 1 and 2 to talk about the garden that God made. It's super interesting. Get this. God makes this garden. What does he call it at the end? He says, and it was good, and it was good, and it was good. What does Solomon do? He tries to recreate that in some sense, right? He tries to make his own stuff, his own gardens, his own parks. And you know what he says? I made it for myself, and what was it? Was it very good? It was vanity. Because it's life under the sun. Because it's trying to do this stuff without God. It's trying to make houses and monuments and things for yourself, not considering God. It's trying to harness the natural world without considering God. Look at verse 7. It goes further, not just the natural world. He says, I also bought myself male and female slaves. And I even had slaves who were born in my house. Okay. Next thing, you might think that what would make you happy, this is even maybe a more higher pleasure. This is like an elite pleasure. Maybe you'd be satisfied if you got to be the boss and you got to be in control and everyone just ran around at your will. Okay? The next one, letter E, is exerting control over people. Maybe you think that will provide the pleasure that will satisfy you. Let Solomon tell you, nope, not really. How many employees do you need to feel like, you're doing well? How many employees or people could be, even that we don't even have like slaves in the same way, then it's not like you're going to hire a bunch of slaves, but like even if you had a bunch of people working for you today, how many would it take for you to feel like, dude, I'm the boss around here? Can I read for you 1 Kings 5 to tell you how many slaves that Solomon had? 1 Kings 5:13 says, King Solomon drafted forced labor out of all of Israel, and the draft numbered 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, which was the place up to the north, 10,000 a month in shifts. Right? So 2/3 of them were off, 1/3 of them was on each month. They would be 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the draft, so one of Solomon's guys. Solomon also had 70,000 burden bearers. What's a burden bearer? That's the ancient semi-truck, right? That's a bunch of dudes who carried stuff everywhere. How many slaves? 70,000 men in his whole kingdom. Their whole job was just to move stuff. 70,000 facilities workers, okay? It's just like, that's a lot of people to move stuff around. And 80,000 stone cutters who worked in the hill country. So what they were doing was they were collecting the materials to help him build the projects. How many slaves, how many people, how many employees will it take for you to feel like you have power and control? Solomon had over 100,000 of them. Vanity. And he also says, and I had much flocks and herds, more than anyone who's before me in Jerusalem. This power and control is like, I got to be the boss. I got to be in charge. He says, but not really. Do you know that the desire for power, and this might be an older person thing, but the desire for power is one of the strongest things that motivates people to do things, whether good or bad. It motivates a lot of bad, but like this desire to be in control and to have power. Solomon says, I had it more than you're going to have it, yet didn't satisfy me. Verse 8, here in Ecclesiastes 2, look at verse 8. It says, I also gathered for myself, again, this is all for him. That's the key to all this. He's doing pleasures for himself. Silver and gold. Do you know that Solomon was extravagantly rich? That's the next one. Letter F, being extravagantly rich. I don't want you to be impressed by the feelings that follow that. Extravagantly rich. Here's just some examples. 1 Kings 10:27. It says, the king, that's Solomon, made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone. And he made cedar, which is really nice wood that was imported from another country up in Lebanon. He made cedar as plentiful as the sycamore of the Shephelah. That means like, you know, all the brush that's in like the little lowlands. So Israel, where Jerusalem was actually very similar to here. And the lowlands, you had trees like the sycamore trees that you might see, you know, planted in various natural spots. It's like, you know, where you go, where there's like a little river or a little, you know, canyon around here, and there's trees and there's like some wood there. He says, you know, there's so much of that everywhere. That's not nice wood, right? He said he made cedar, the most expensive stuff, as common as that. He was filthy rich, like burning $100 bills rich. Like, you know how pennies right now are kind of worthless? Have you heard that they were trying to get rid of pennies? You heard about that? Yeah, because a penny costs like 3 cents to make or 2 cents to make or more than that, and it like only is 1 cent. It's like we're losing money every penny we make, right? Because that's how worthless a penny is. So they're going to try to like get rid of that. But like you know, you could just like throw away pennies and it wouldn't even matter. That's what silver was like back then. That's how extravagantly rich. Because don't you think you'd get a little bit of a thrill out of owning like a lot? Like being the richest person around? Don't you think? Like, because you won't be that. Not to the extent he was. And in comparison to others, I just don't think any of you will be that way. But don't you think it'd be kind of cool to have everything? He says, yeah, there's something to it. There was fun in getting it. But then when you got it, it's like, not as much pleasure in it as you might think. That was silver and gold. Look at the next phrase. It says, he also gathered for himself the treasure of kings and provinces. I want to stop on that one to say, what is that? What's the treasure of kings and provinces? Do you know that it's one thing to be filthy rich? Okay, that's one thing. Especially if today you became really rich. That's interesting. Money can buy you a lot of things, but it can't buy you everything. There is some stuff that is so valuable and so rare, you have to have relationships to even get those things. The way I put it, the next one, I want you to not be impressed by owning rare collectibles. I'm talking about the cars that are so nice that there's only one of them made and nobody else can buy them. I'm talking about the watches that cost more than your house. I'm talking about the Birkin bags that, you know, that exist. I don't know about those, but I know those are nice. I'm talking about the clothes from the fashion designers that like you can't buy anywhere. You have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, but instead they're just giving it to you. I'm talking about a level of exclusivity with stuff that for him was likely, what's the treasure of kings and provinces? Likely priceless artifacts, cultural things. The stuff that belongs in the museums were just given to him. Do you think owning that stuff will make you happy? The stuff that nobody else has? Solomon says no. See, this is where it's helpful. Solomon said this. Right? I can't say this. I don't own anything that's like that valuable, right? So if I told you, hey guys, like being super rich and owning the nicest cars and the nicest watches and the biggest houses, it doesn't make you happy. You could step back and say like, yeah, right. Well, John, you don't know any of that. So like, who are you to say? I'm totally with you. I am nobody to say that. But Solomon is. And he had it. And he said, doesn't make you happy. Verse 8 continues. What did he gather for himself? He got for himself singers, both men and women. Okay. Singers. I don't want, okay. I was going to say something mean. I don't want a bunch of singers around me. Right? It's like, oh yeah, he gathered all the theater kids to come sing and dance. Like, I don't know if you really want that, right? Let me put it to you like this. Music was a luxury, right, that normal people didn't have back then. To have singers or people who made music was a luxury. To have them work for you and you were in control of the playlist, right, that's really, really significant. And when it says men and women singers, you know what that means? It wasn't worship, okay? Because only men were a part of the Levitical system. So it wasn't like he got, had the best worship leader around him. Nope, this was entertainment, okay? So the next one, don't be impressed by this, is binging on curated entertainment. He had as much entertainment as any person could have. And you know what's amazing? You have more than he ever had. You could go get lost in entertainment for the rest of your life until you turn 90 years old, and you would never see everything there is to see. You would never hear every song there is to hear. You could hear the best artists at full blast with headphones in a way that they never could have dreamed of. But he says it's vanity, just like it's vanity. How do you feel after scrolling on your curated Instagram feed for 2 hours without getting up? Feel good after that, right? Like, you already know it's not good, right? Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? And Solomon, who is more like a rocket scientist, tells us, I'm a rocket scientist, and it doesn't work out, okay? Yeah. You have more curated entertainment than Solomon had. That's just amazing. The next one, hard one to translate, but he says, I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. I think what that means, so technically in the Hebrew, the delight of the sons of man comes first, and then there's these two words that he translates, or the ESV translates, many concubines, which literally, if it's the word concubine, which is probably the right one, it's concubines and concubines, right? It's like women and women, right? And a concubine was basically just a woman who was a servant, a slave, who her job was just to have sex with whoever owned her, okay? So that's Solomon, right? So next one. What is also not going to satisfy? Giving into sexual indulgence. Some of you think that will make you happy. That to have whatever you want sexually will make you happy. He says, no, didn't really do it. Yeah, this word concubines is debated. It's the only time this word is used in the Old Testament. So there's another word for concubines elsewhere. This is a unique word. It's used in ancient Near Eastern text to describe a concubine. So that's why we think that's what it means. But it has Hebrew words that are close. The closest word to it is possession, right? So this is a woman who's a possession for him, which we already read that. 1 Kings 11:3 said that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And it says in that text, his wives turned away his heart. Yeah. So, and again, you think, well, I'd never have that, right? Well, yeah, probably. But there is more sexual immorality available to you than there was to him. Just on your phone. You want to talk numbers, there's more people that make themselves available to you for sexual misuse than Solomon had. So this giving into sexual indulgence, he says it's not all that it's cracked up to be. Deuteronomy 17:17 said that kings were not supposed to do this, that they were not supposed to multiply wives. And remember how I said none of these were explicitly sinful? This is the only one that I'd say, like, I think this was clearly not allowed by God's law. But I'll tell you this, totally acceptable when it comes to the culture, when it comes to what kings did. I mean, if he had 80,000 people who just carried, burdens for him, having 300 concubines is not like impressive numbers, right? That's not that impressive. I mean, there's more people working in the palace than that. So, anyway, he says that a lot, and that, for a lot of you, that's it right there. For you, that's the number one thing. You think that would make you happy? But he says no. Oh, by the way, do you think getting married will satisfy you? You think, I'm going to do it the right way. Okay. Well, let's talk to Solomon. What book did he write? the Song of Solomon. What's that all about? How excited he is about his wife. One of them. Which one? Great question. And how long did that last? Because it kind of seems like he moved on pretty quick, right? In all of his excitement and all of his love. Right? And that's the thing, right? The more you add, the more the desire grows for more, right? You think that would satisfy you? Really? Like deep down satisfy you? Look at Solomon, dude. He married a ton of people, and he just kept marrying. Like, what was that like? Let's just, like, what in the world? Like, I don't know what the process was like, but it was just like, he just kept getting married over and over. I mean, imagine working in the palace, like, oh, he got married again. Oh, he got married again. Oh, he got married again. It's like, it's just strange, right? But what would you learn? You'd be like, look at this. This guy has everything, but he just keeps getting more. It's not satisfying him. Then verse 9, where we already went, it says, I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Letter J, becoming the greatest of all time also does not satisfy you. And that's what he says. I became the greatest. So if you want to compare me to other people, guess what? I am better. You want to compare me to who has more? Guess what? It's me. Guess who's smarter? It's me. Guess who, that's the level that he actually attained. He's not just bluffing. He's telling the truth. But even that didn't satisfy him. Verse 10 says, I kept my heart and my eyes from no pleasure. I had everything I wanted. That's the last one. Letter K, getting everything you want. Some of us think that is what will satisfy you. Just getting everything I want. Just please listen to Solomon and how he says, nope, it didn't. So if the sermon felt like bad news, that was on purpose, because it kind of is. The bad news is this stuff doesn't satisfy. Just one thing about the good news of this. This is where Jesus comes into the book of Ecclesiastes, because he's not involved, right? Very much not so. That's the whole point. It's life under the sun. But Jesus came up to a woman in John chapter 4 who had tried a lot of things, who had been married multiple times, who was living with somebody who wasn't her husband. And he said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. So I know we're not talking about it for very much today, but you need to understand what God offers is better. We'll talk more about that some other time. But let me pray for you that we don't get caught in the trap of pleasures, okay? Let me pray. God, we know that the pleasures of the world are real, but we also know that they're fading. We know that they give some kind of excitement, but they don't satisfy. Just pray that these students, wherever they are with this, would be warned. Some of them would be shaken up and caused to even repent, to turn to you, to want to follow you because of this text and this sermon. Pray for others who are struggling to not pursue the pleasures of the world. I pray that they would be struck today by the seriousness of these things, and they would be done chasing those things. So please help us all. We know that this is something with the world that we live in. It's hard to not want what the world has to offer, but I pray that we would be wise and we would be godly, and you would just make our hearts soft to be changed to be more like you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.